Imagine your stomach churning at the thought of a casual chat or going to a party or some social event. That's what it's like for people with social anxiety. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Ros and I have seen a rise in people coming for social anxiety, certainly since the COVID pandemic. And millions of people suffer with this. So this is for you if you suffer with any form of social anxiety or you know someone who does. So stay tuned, keep listening, and subscribe to whatever channel you're listening or watching on. Hi, Ros.
Hi, Ali. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Yeah, this is a good topic to talk about. I think it's such a common one, I certainly see a lot of it. I think maybe because I work with people with CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, and it's very effective for social anxiety. So what we're going to do is dive into what it is, how it shows up, so how people experience it, how it impacts people's lives and relationships, and what can be done to help. Because
I think that's going to be so helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot of hope for social anxiety. It can change.
Yeah, excellent. I think it's going to be great because, as you say, I certainly, I mean, also, I can relate to it, myself through certain experiences. So that kind of will perhaps come into the mix as well in terms of our own personal experiences. So I think it's going to be a really useful one. It's one I really wanted to do to help people.
Great. Let's go into it then. So let's take a look at what social anxiety is and how it shows up in individuals, emotionally, physically, thoughts and behaviours, and what it's not as well, because it's not shyness, which can lead to social anxiety, but shyness is more of an innate personality trait that children can have from quite a young age. So, it's not related to thought processes and beliefs because they're too young to have formed those.
Can I just clarify that with you, Ali? So the distinction being that the thoughts that haven't been developed therefore suggest that shyness is a different thing.
Well, not necessarily about that, but like if you think about children that are shy, both of my children were shy, even though I took them to baby groups. I really wanted them to not be shy because I was incredibly shy growing up.
Yeah, me too.
I wanted to do everything I possibly could to make sure that wasn't the case for them, but they were just shy kids. Even though I did all that, they found it hard to be around new people. They were much more relaxed with people they knew. So shyness can develop into social anxiety, but not always, which we will probably go on to later. The social anxiety is where someone becomes very fearful of. It might be things like the obvious things like parties, but it might also be some of the day-to-day things, like just going on the train or just going to work or going into the supermarket or walking down the road. It can be very debilitating.
Restricting. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know people that have got to the point where they hardly go anywhere because most places you go have people around.
So it becomes, I guess, something which we'll talk about. What happens when that's the case.
Yeah, when it's got to that point where someone's life has become so limited because of it. But so someone that's experiencing social anxiety probably ends up coming to therapy because of that, because they realize it's impacting their life in a certain way. And, that might be that they want to be dating and they can't. And it might be that they want to be able to go shopping, but they can't even do that.
So when they really notice their life is impacted, that's when you'll tend to get the call.
Yeah. And often it's been going on for a long, long time before someone gets to that point, which is, I guess, true of a lot of difficulties, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that can be also the same in any situation in terms of like couples as well. Sometimes it can be at sort of more of a crisis point, really.
Yeah.
where then people will turn to really wanting to do something about it because it has become unbearable or unmanageable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we were to do what's called a 5-aspect model in CBT, which is where you look at a situation and you break down what are the thoughts going through my mind, what are the emotions I'm feeling, what are the physical sensations I'm feeling, and what are the behaviors I'm doing. We could have a look at that, a typical example of someone with social anxiety might experience within all of that.
Okay, that would be helpful.
And maybe we can relate this to ourselves as well, because I know both of us have had elements of this. You said before we were doing this, that you recognize it, and I recognize it in myself.
Absolutely, yeah. I haven't had it to the point where I have, I think, felt kind of really restricted by it. But I think I'm one of those people who my shyness kind of in a way, which I experienced as a child, I think has developed almost into areas where I would find, particularly for me, it's groups and parties. It's something that I would find harder. And I think I've, with age and choices that I'm making, that's changed. But I think that that's where it would show up for me.
Okay. Yeah. So if we were to use an example of someone going to, well, let's just say the supermarket. Let's just use an easy one. And they've got social anxiety, and their fear is that everyone's going to be looking at them and seeing that they're really nervous and that they're really they're shaking and they're embarrassed and they're red, and that everyone's going to see it, because often it's about how people perceive you, that they're seen by others in a situation.
Mm-hmm. So what they think they're being perceived as.
Yes. How they think people view them.
Mm-hmm. So what's going on in their mind? So it's their own thoughts, but that they're putting out onto how they think the world looks at them.
Yeah. Which is exacerbated by this cycle. So we'll talk about that. So the thoughts are going to be, everyone's going to be looking at me. What are they going to see? Are they going to see me looking like a quivering wreck? Are they going to see someone that's got no confidence? Are they going to see my face bright red? Mm-hmm. It could be all kinds of things, but it's that the focus is on how they think people are going to see them. And also,
it's almost like a spotlight, isn't it? Like a spotlight coming onto them, and everybody's looking.
Yeah, exactly that. And then it's a vicious cycle, because those thoughts bring on the anxiety even more if it wasn't already there, which it probably is, because people then have anticipated it before they even got there. And that anxiety, that fear, brings in physical sensations. So what do we know about what anxiety creates in the body? It can make you shaky. It can make you sweaty. It can give you a dry mouth. It can make you feel sick. It can make you feel a bit dizzy. There's all these physical symptoms that come with anxiety.
Which is that threat response, isn't it? It's something I'm perceiving or experiencing as a threat, and this is what my body's doing in preparation for that.
Yeah, getting ready to fight or run away.
Mm-hmm.
So
really hard, isn't it? It's horrible.
It's horrible. Anxiety feels horrible.
Yeah.
So you're then in this situation where you're imagining this is what's happening. Maybe you've made yourself go to the supermarket and you're starting to feel anxious and you're starting to feel sweaty, and your thoughts then go to, oh, well, now everyone really is going to see that I'm this quivering wreck with no confidence.
Kind of almost reinforces that evidence, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there might be some behaviours that are coming in to try and prevent the feared thing from happening. Examples of that might be not looking around you, looking down, going into the shop very quickly and coming out very quickly without looking at anybody. Going in when it's really quiet, sort of checking the time, or is it going to be a busy time? Is it going to be a quiet time? not using the person at the checkout, using the automatic checkout things.
So avoiding.
Yeah. So that you can see this vicious cycle happens and reinforces the belief that I can't do this, and really it's best not to even bother.
Mm-hmm. Let's go home and get a home delivery of shopping instead.
And that can extend into, like I said, even just going for a walk. I've had people say, I can't go for a walk because I feel like when the cars drive past me, they're all looking at me. They're all looking at me and judging me.
It's almost like there's no escape, is there, from that thought of what kind of judgment from the outside?
Yeah. It is any other person in the environment is going to be seeing me in this negative light.
Really, really hard, because you can see why then people, will not go out so much and will become potentially much more isolated and fearful of the outside world.
Yeah, why would you go out when you feel like that every time?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in a way, you're not selling it. I wouldn't.
You don't fancy a dose of that.
I don't fancy a dose of that. It sounds, if I can, and I imagine what that must feel like in those instances. Now I can see that I would stay more and more indoors. I would, like you say, find times where I am not going to come across people.
Yeah. And then the more someone is restricting their life because of this, the more likely they are then to become depressed. Because they're not engaging in things that give them joy or pleasure or connection. And that means there's a much more likelihood of someone becoming depressed.
Yeah.
And of course, nowadays, there's so many ways that we can avoid actually interacting with humans, aren't there?
Yes. I mean, all sorts, social media. We've done an episode, haven't we, on AI. It's like you don't have to interact with a real person. You can keep yourself, you can live on your own even.
Yeah. You don't have to speak on the phone.
No.
I remember when I was young, obviously we didn't have mobile phones. It was just the old-fashioned dial-up phones. And we would have to phone to make an appointment or do anything like that, really. And I hated it. I was so shy. I hated it, but you had to learn to do it, didn't you? Because it was the only way.
Yeah.
And now I think if that were me now, I could have avoided that.
Yeah. And it's the same with your example with shopping, it's the same with that. You can get home deliveries. You don't have to go to a shop. You can get, everything's fairly instant, isn't it? You can get deliveries for anything. Actually, there's so much that we can avoid having to go out.
So with all of that, with all the technology, with all the virtual things, with all the ways that we can use technology to not speak to a human, is it any wonder that social anxiety is on the increase?
No wonder at all.
No. How about we delve into what makes someone more likely to develop social anxiety then? We talked a little bit about a child who's shy. And I think it's helpful to think about this because how that is shyness is dealt with, how that shyness is treated in a child is going to make a difference to whether that child overcomes the shyness and becomes more confident or kind of takes on this label of I'm a shy person and I can't do this.
Yeah.
It's so easy to... Sorry, go on.
No, yeah, I can really see how that can develop if depending on your environment and how you're sort of interacted with. If you as a child, if you're feeling shy, of course, like you say, you might just be continuing being a shy person with whatever happens. But what impact that has in terms of how you're responded to, not just with parents, but also society, like going out and seeing how you're responded to then. It's not just necessarily at home, is it? It's going out and going to that play group, or going to, when you start going to school, and what's the impression that people are getting of you being a shy child.
Yeah. And how parents are with that is an important factor, because if you're a compassionate, loving parent, the natural thing to do is to talk for your child.
Mm-hmm.
The natural thing to do is to say, oh, she's shy, and talk for them, or do things for them, or say, oh, don't worry, you don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Which already brings a label as well, doesn't it? It was already bringing in that labeling that this is what I am. I am a shy child, and I don't have to do that talking because somebody else is doing it for me.
Somebody else will talk for me. Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. And like you say, play groups, schools. I think shy people are more of a target for being bullied.
Mm-hmm. Because they stand out in a way, which is a point, isn't it? Because it's somebody who's not necessarily interacting, and you want to hide and kind of be not noticed, and yet therefore it can become more noticeable because you're the child who isn't necessarily interacting.
Yeah. And teachers sometimes get this very wrong as well. So the shy person either gets overlooked, sitting at the back of the class, not noticed.
The quiet one in the corner.
Quiet one in the corner. Everyone else is quite taking up the space. Or it could be that there's a teacher that's sort of just saying, come on then, speak out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that humiliation that can come with that.
Yeah.
Feeling.
I think I experienced that. I struggled at school, and I remember that feeling. And I mean, I remember my kind of first day, or one of my first days. I must have been about 4.5, going to school and seeing my mum go, and finding that so hard, which I know lots of children, with that sort of separation anxiety, if you like, can come in. But it was more how difficult it was then. I mean, I remember a lovely teacher who was very kind and loving, but I struggled so much in that environment, because if I didn't feel like I knew something, especially as I got older, the kind of feeling like you had to know things, the spotlight becoming on you, and then not knowing things and feeling that humiliation that you talk about.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It is. And those memories stick.
They do.
They get stored in the body as well. Those memories get stored as that humiliation and the embarrassment, and that, God, I never want to feel that again feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so impressionable, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of the time when someone has social anxiety, there are these kinds of experiences in their past of humiliation and embarrassment, of perhaps being unpopular, being bullied. There will likely be some early experiences that have helped shape that fear of being judged and how you're perceived.
So that's one area. And I guess there are other areas too, aren't there?
Of?
Well, I'm thinking in terms of, maybe people with neurodiversity.
Yes.
So, you're talking about the sort of experiences contextually and in terms of the family and the environments that we go into as we grow up. And I'm just thinking in terms of people with neurodiversity and what that might be like for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Particularly autism, I think. People on the autistic spectrum have a tendency towards being more content in their own company, but also perhaps more socially anxious, more shy.
And so that can be an additional thing, can't it? That's then inside what, when you say about the body experience and how somebody feels when they're going out, as it were, into the world in whatever context that might be. And if they are on the autistic spectrum or do have any kind of, neurodiversity that can impact them in those environments, then it's going to be that much harder.
Yeah.
And then they might also have been a shy child.
And they may have had bullying or negative experiences with their peers, being left out, not feeling like they're a part of it. There's so many little pieces of this, aren't there, that can just all come together.
Yeah. And contribute.
I guess the other element of it is people in their work. I'm just kind of going on a different tangent here, but it just came to me about having to speak up in public at meetings.
Yes.
How hard that can be for someone with social anxiety.
Yeah. I noticed that when I've been to, I don't know, an event, and I mean, you'll probably remember this because we've done certain trainings together, and that I really hate it. That first part of away, and you know that I struggle with this one.
I think we both do. I think a lot of people do.
I think they do. Where, you know, they're saying, could you just introduce yourself and say a few words? Yeah. It's like, really? Do I really have to do this? Because it feels or even if I'm going to answer a question and sort of put my hand up, as it were, I either sensate, you know, the heart beating faster that I get, you know, I start to sweat those physiological responses that I get to that.
Yeah.
Let alone if I have to give a presentation.
Yeah. That's a really good example, isn't it? Because when you do any kind of course like that, it's a common thing, isn't it? Let's just go around and everyone introduce themselves, and you know it's coming. And even when you're anticipating, oh, they're going to do this, that can start to build the anxiety. And then you're thinking about, what am I going to say? You're kind of, if you're anything like me, you're rehearsing, what am I going to say? And if you're not first, they're going around these people.
I'm already feeling,
you're feeling it
more anxious. Yeah.
And they're going around all these people who you're imagining don't have this anxiety and who are really confident. And
I'm going to come up with really eloquent expressions of themselves.
Yeah. And whilst they're talking, you haven't got a bloody clue what they're saying because you're in your head rehearsing what you're going to say.
Well, and also you're feeling anxiety, and that's stopping you thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when it does come to you, you might be sort of, oh, my mouth's really dry. I can't actually speak fluently now. I'm really nervous. Yeah. So that's a really good example of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I know that well. I mean, I as I say, we both kind of go through that, don't we? We try and, in a way, the answer for us sometimes is kind of keeping our head down, isn't it? It's like almost avoiding it. Yeah. It's like when people are at those trainings kind of ask randomly about questions, and then there's kind of this silence for a bit, isn't there?
Yes.
And then it seems to be a few people who tend to be then the ones who answer. And again, the people that you think, well, they're more confident. They obviously know what they're talking about. You know, it sort of reinforces this belief, doesn't it? That I don't. I'm going to just try and keep my mouth shut. I'm going to try and hide. I'm going to try and not catch anybody's eye contact so that I'm not picked. So all these avoidance behaviours. Yeah.
Yeah. And going back, so went off on a bit of a tangent there, but just coming back to what makes someone more likely to have social anxiety. Some people have been brought up in a family where the family is quite a closed, happy environment, but there's not much socializing going on. And it's very safe.
I've come across families like that.
Have you? Yeah. It's a lovely upbringing, a lovely, safe upbringing and family environment, but the family haven't been particularly social, so that learning hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm. I wonder also if it can be the other way too, when a family is particularly social. So parents perhaps are very social. You are you have a tendency to be shy. You know, you're coming from the shy kind of spectrum, as it were. And then what that's like, you know, a bit like when you were saying the parent talking for you. And I think I've been at fault for doing that with my kids when they were growing up. And one of my kids being more shy and having social anxiety, actually, and how I would have overcompensated. And what that might have been like in some ways, maybe it was a helpful thing in some ways because they didn't have to then do that. So it kept that nervous system perhaps a bit calmer, but also not necessarily helping them to find a way of doing it themselves.
Yeah. It's a difficult balance to have, I think, isn't it? Between I want to make sure you're okay, but also I need to make sure you're challenged here, and you stretch that comfort zone.
Especially as a parent, isn't it? Because you really are feeling for your child and you want things to be okay. It's such an, it's such a natural response, isn't it, to try and take away pain.
Yeah. Then we want to start looking at what maintains social anxiety. So an anxiety can happen, can develop within somebody because of what we've spoken about, but usually there's something that keeps it going, that maintains the problem. And
can you give some examples of that?
Yeah. So there's many examples here. Social anxiety. Well, most of the anxiety difficulties have lots of ways that they're maintained. The big one is avoidance. Yeah. So avoiding situations. You don't want to feel the anxiety. It's a horrible situation. Why do it? I'm not going to do it. But then you are never teaching yourself that you can do it. You are never teaching your body that this is okay, it's safe. You're never stretching that window of tolerance, as we say, that kind of comfort zone doesn't get bigger.
Or developing a new neural pathway. There is something, isn't there, about that practicing, that is so important, isn't it, in order to be, like you say, developing. It's almost like that developing of a muscle. If we go to the gym, then we're going to be developing our muscles, aren't we? And we do that over time. If we did it suddenly, then it would be really difficult and we'd be in a lot of pain with it. But if we do it gradually, it's so much more useful and helpful and productive.
That's a really good point, yeah. So avoidance is a big one. But even when someone is doing the thing, there are lots of behaviours that they can engage in that maintain the anxiety, maintain the problem. Maybe temporarily it eases the anxiety, but long term it sustains it. So, for example, anticipatory worry. So this is before the event, really worrying about what might happen. And we did.
So you're already playing it through your mind.
You're already running it through. What if this? What if that? We've done an episode on worry, so do check that out, because worry is a difficulty in itself that can be changed. But yeah, this anticipatory, and that can go, like if you've got an event in 2 weeks, that can start really early.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, playing it through, imagining the worst case scenarios.
Which in a way we know, don't we, that with neuroplasticity and with these neural pathways, that even when we think something, it can keep the neural pathway going. So in that negative way, isn't it? It's like if I'm going through all the negative scenarios, it's reinforcing the same pattern, isn't it? Rather than developing anything new.
Yeah, because you're imagining it. So it's like, your brain still thinks, oh, we're here now.
Yeah.
Building the anxiety. So that keeps it going. In the situation, there are things people might do that maybe they feel helps them. So, for example, not looking around you, keeping your head down.
You mentioned that, didn't you, in your example with the supermarket, all those.
It's a really common one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you never then, because whilst you're doing that, you're imagining everyone's looking at you.
Mm-hmm. Your body's still feeling it.
Yeah. But of course, you're not disconfirming that belief by looking up and seeing, well, actually, most people have got their own lives that they're focused on, and nobody really cares. And even if they do look at you, it's probably just a glance and then away.
Which is just human kind of normal passing, isn't it? As it were. Or, excuse me, can I just get to that row of whatever the thing is that they're looking at on the supermarket shelf?
Yeah. Phones are often used, people just doing something on their phone to distract them and to not look around. What else have I? Oh, alcohol, drinking. So that they don't feel the anxiety and they're more confident, or drugs, for both.
Yeah, sort of Dutch courage.
Yeah. I've had people say, well, I had a period in my life when I wasn't socially anxious. And I say, well, what was going on then? And he said, I was out drinking all the time.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's understandable, isn't it? It's really helpful to numb those edges.
Yeah.
But again, it's not facing up to what's really happening and what's really going. And it's temporary. It's these temporary things, isn't it? And also, actually, not good for you necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah. Rehearsing is a common one. So before the event, rehearsing what you're going to say, or rehearsing different scenarios and what you might say in each scenario. And whilst that might sound helpful, it's keeping that anxiety going. And then in the event, your mind is thinking about this script that you've got rather than actually being present and engaged with someone.
Which is a really important point that you're making, isn't it? Because we aren't engaged when we're in a state of anxiety, and when we're thinking that the world is pointing a whopping great finger at you, saying something's wrong with you, or whatever the beliefs that we have around it. It's so difficult to be present, and you mentioned earlier sort of living a fulfilling life of connection and richness.
Yeah, there's in the event, the trying to remember the script and say the right thing, and then even using the script rather than feeling like relaxed and I'm going to be okay, just going with the flow.
More like a performance in a way rather than something that's in the moment again.
Yeah. And generally this self-focused attention in the event. So you're very focused on what you're experiencing, what you're thinking. It's all about what's happening within, and it's not about what's out there and around
and
me.
The reality.
Yeah. And imagining that this is what people are seeing. So a part of social anxiety with CBT is you might say, describe to me what you imagine people see. Draw me a picture of what you imagine people see in you. And it's usually a very negative view that people have. And at the end of CBT, you might say, now describe what people think or see. And it's usually very different.
And not surprising if you think of what you've described about where this can come from and the beliefs that are kind of established along the way negatively about oneself, and then kind of seen that that's what everybody's, perceiving everybody to think the same thing about you, kind of almost giving everybody else the power to judge you and your worth and value, as it were. It's kind of not surprising that then is where they're starting, in that negative place.
So there's so many safety behaviours that people can engage in, and I would encourage people to have a think about that for themselves. What I might do is put a list of examples in the show notes that would be quite helpful, I think.
I think that's a really good idea.
For people to just check in, do I do this? Because when you do it, you might not realise.
Yeah, exactly, because it's going to, like you said earlier, it is something that's usually been going on a long time.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a sort of familiar way, isn't it, of knowing that you're trying to reduce your feelings of anxiety and not necessarily actually realising that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, I've thought of another one. The post-event rumination as well. So people then do the event and then almost replay it in their mind with a negative lens over it, looking for the bad things, replaying it. They might find a bit that they think, oh, yeah, I look like a right idiot there. And of course, that then just makes you feel worse about yourself and reinforces the whole thing.
It's almost like I told you, everybody was looking at me.
Yeah. Or things like, I didn't even engage in that whole event. Well, you didn't engage because you were engaging in the safety behaviours.
Yeah.
So it's all reinforcing the anxiety.
Yeah. So horrible, isn't it? It's so there's so much to it, isn't there, in terms of how our minds work and where we go, and then how that impacts our bodies, and then how that impacts our behaviours. And it's such a, like you say, the cycle that can go on, a vicious cycle that can go on, that then kind of keeps it going and keeps it going.
Yeah. So what can be done? Lots can be done.
Good bit.
That's a hopeful thing. Yeah. Cognitive behavioural therapy is a great therapy for any anxiety difficulty, but also EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which would then you could be working on those experiences that firstly have sown the seeds of this, processing through EMDR, but also the more recent events that perhaps have contributed as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of two options there.
Yeah. Have you worked with anyone using EMDR for social anxiety?
With social anxiety, no, I haven't actually as yet. Anxiety in different ways, but not actually specifically social anxiety. But I certainly have people who experience it that I'm working with in other ways, perhaps not even necessarily with CBT, but perhaps one of the things maybe I would look at also is working with the sort of different parts of us and how we have this social anxiety part, but what about all these other parts that we can develop in order to be able to have develop a more sort of compassionate voice within ourselves and lead us into a different way of dealing with certain situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. What's called internal family systems therapy.
So what else can help people, Ellie? And if you were sort of working in terms of CBT?
Yeah. So I'm going to give people a few things that they can take away from this and have a think about. So the first one would be, I would say, reflect on your past and think about the things that perhaps you've experienced, the family that you grew up in, what school was like, the events that perhaps have meant that you are someone with social anxiety. And write it down. If you've got a journal, great. Just spend a little bit of time really thinking about this, about the roots.
And I think it's just worth coming in there for people who might not know about journaling. And it does suit some people and it doesn't suit others. But one of the things that it does, isn't it? It's sort of separating the thoughts more from your mind onto the paper. So giving some kind of distance so that you can become more observing, really, in a way, can't you?
Yeah. And also more reflective. Yeah.
More reflective.
Rather than being sucked into it, you're kind of stepping back and looking at it from a bit more distance, bit more, hopefully a bit of compassion in there that, well, this makes sense that I have social anxiety because this. So that would be the first step. The second would be noticing the behaviours that you might be engaging in that you think are keeping you more comfortable, safer in the environment, like the anticipatory worry, like the avoidance, like the not looking around you and the post-rumination. Have a think for yourself about what you might be engaging in terms of safety behaviours with your social anxiety.
And you're going to put a few of those, aren't you, in the notes so that people
we'll
can look back
in there.
Yeah, I
and
think
again, just write them down in a journal or even on your phone in your notes, so that you can start to realise, okay. And another thing that I would suggest with this, it can be really helpful, is with each one, you can go through each one and write why you do it. So, for example, I look down because it helps me feel less anxious. And I feel like then I don't see people looking at me. And what the unintended consequence of that is, well, you never get confirmation or disconfirmation that actually people are not doing that. So the intended consequence of that behaviour and the unintended consequence. And that starts to give you a picture of how it might be feeding the cycle.
Sounds really helpful. I can see that by sort of putting it in the way that you are, and like you say, possibly writing it down or reflecting on it at the very least, you can start seeing a pattern, can't you?
Yeah. And finally, choosing one of those safety behaviours and trying out dropping that safety behaviour if you can. And this is where I think therapy can be really helpful, because it's very easy for me to sit here and say, just drop your safety behaviour. But with the help of a therapist, there's some support in how you can do that, some accountability with that, how is this going to look. But from a self-help perspective, perhaps just choosing one. The walking around and looking around you is a good one to start with, and seeing what you learn from it.
Sounds good. And like you say, it's something which isn't necessarily easy to do.
No.
But it's taking a tiny step, isn't it, into doing something. Once you've done those sort of reflective lists, you can see what feels perhaps manageable to try.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably going to struggle a bit to stop worrying. But again, do refer to our worry episode, because there might be some helpful tips in there. But some of them might be easier to just drop and just experiment with.
Yeah. So. Great. I think that's so helpful, Ali, and it's really helpful to hear from your perspective and from the CBT perspective, and also that reminder that it's really helpful for people if they are really struggling to find a CBT therapist. I think it's one of those therapies approaches where, it might be a long list, but you can also access through your GP if you don't have the funds for, which I think is really important.
Yeah, if you're in the UK, that is.
That is, I'm sure it must be, in other countries, a way of accessing it too, but
hopefully.
I don't know that.
Yeah,
hopefully, yeah. So thank you. I think that's really informative. I really hope that helps.
Good. There's probably lots I've missed within this. So any professionals listening to it and thinking, oh, she's missed this. Yeah, I probably have.
Well, and we're wanting just to give a snapshot, aren't we? And it's just opening up a conversation about it, and hopefully that will start helping people think about their experiences.
Maybe that's my social anxiety coming in.
Maybe.
What do they, if they're watching me, do they think I'm useless? Do they think I'm not very knowledgeable?
Your belief system coming in, and therefore that social anxiety potentially. Yeah. So if everybody can remember to like and subscribe and follow and share with anybody you think this might be useful for, that would be really helpful. We really want to spread the word, don't we? Yeah,
I think it's about helping the algorithms, isn't it? As much as I hate all that, as much as it's so annoying, it's the way it gets it out there to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just this start, isn't it? Something which gives a little bit of a help, perhaps, hopefully.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks so much, Ali. That was really interesting.
You're welcome. Great to see you.
See you next time.
Bye.